Hello, true crime enthusiasts. Today, we're delving into one of the most notorious unsolved murders in American history, the Black Dahlia case. A story that combines the glamour of 1940s Hollywood with unimaginable horror, creating a mystery that has captivated the public imagination for over 75 years. Before we begin, I need to warn you that this episode contains graphic descriptions of violence and disturbing content. The details of this case are particularly gruesome, and while we'll handle them as respectfully as possible, listener discretion is strongly advised. On the morning of January 15, 1947, Betty Bersinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter along South Norton Avenue in Los Angeles. What she discovered that day would become the stuff of dark legend, a sight so horrific that it would haunt her for the rest of her life. There, in a vacant lot, lay the mutilated body of a young woman, posed in a grotesque manner. The victim was Elizabeth Short, though the world would come to know her by a different name, the Black Dahlia. But to understand this case fully, we need to go back and learn who Elizabeth Short was before she became the subject of Los Angeles' most infamous unsolved murder. She wasn't just a victim or a newspaper headline. She was a real person with dreams, ambitions, and a life that was cut tragically short. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. She was the third of 5 daughters, born to Cleo and Phoebe Short. Her early life was marked by hardship. Her father's business was ruined by the 1929 stock market crash, and in 1930, he faked his suicide to escape his financial troubles, abandoning his family. Phoebe was left to raise 5 daughters alone during the Great Depression. Elizabeth, or Beth as she was known to family and friends, suffered from respiratory problems as a child. Doctors recommended she spend winters in a warmer climate. This advice would eventually lead her to California, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. In her late teens, Beth began to develop the striking looks that would later capture the public's imagination. She stood 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed 115 pounds, with raven black hair, pale skin, and bright blue eyes. She had a habit of wearing all black clothing, which would later contribute to her posthumous nickname. Friends described her as ambitious but naive, someone who dreamed of becoming an actress or model, but perhaps didn't fully understand the harsh realities of Hollywood. In 1943, at age 19, Short moved to California to live with her father, who had resurfaced and was working at the Vallejo Naval Shipyard. This reunion was short-lived. After a few months of tension, she moved out and began working at the Post Exchange at Camp Cook, now Vandenberg Air Force Base. It was here that she first began dating military men, earning a reputation as a party girl, though friends insisted she was more of a tease than truly promiscuous. Over the next few years, Short moved between California, Florida, and Massachusetts, never staying in one place for too long. She worked as a waitress and occasionally entered beauty contests at military bases. She had several romantic relationships, including an engagement to Army Air Force officer Lieutenant Gordon Fickling. However, like many of her relationships, this engagement ended in disappointment. In July 1946, Short returned to Los Angeles for the last time. She spent her final 6 months living in various places around the city, often staying with friends or in hotels. She continued working as a waitress and was frequently seen at bars and nightclubs along Hollywood Boulevard. During this time, she shared an apartment with 8 other young women at the Chancellor Apartments on Cherokee Avenue. The last confirmed sighting of Elizabeth Short alive was on January 9, 1947, at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Security guards remembered seeing her using the lobby telephone and then walking out onto Grand Avenue. 6 days later, her body would be found. The discovery of Short's body on that January morning unleashed a media frenzy unlike anything Los Angeles had seen before. The crime scene was particularly disturbing. Her body had been severed at the waist and drained of blood. The killer had mutilated her corpse extensively, cutting a Glasgow smile from the corners of her mouth to her ears. Her face and body bore numerous cuts and bruises. The cause of death was determined to be blood loss from the cuts and shock from blunt force trauma to the head. The positioning of the body suggested a deliberate attempt to create a theatrical scene. Short's arms were raised above her head, and her lower half was positioned a foot away from her torso. Her intestines had been tucked neatly beneath her buttocks. The body had been washed clean, leading investigators to believe the murder had occurred elsewhere. The Los Angeles Police Department launched one of the largest investigations in its history. The case was assigned to Captain Jack Donahoe and Sergeants Harry Hansen and Finney Brown of the Homicide Division. They were joined by District Attorney investigators Walter Morgan and Frank Jemison. The investigation was complicated by intense media coverage. The Los Angeles Examiner and Herald Express competed fiercely for scoops, often interfering with police work in their quest for headlines. It was the Examiner that dubbed Elizabeth the Black Dahlia, playing on the recent release of the film noir The Blue Dahlia, and Short's penchant for black clothing. The media portrayed Short as a promiscuous party girl, though this characterization was largely unfair. While she did date frequently, friends described her as more of a flirt who actually had strict boundaries. She didn't drink alcohol, though she would often order Coca-Cola at bars while encouraging men to buy expensive drinks. The investigation quickly revealed that Short had spent her final weeks moving between various apartments and hotels. She had little money and relied on friends and admirers for support. Her last known address was the Washington Hotel at 809 East Washington Boulevard, where she stayed until January 8, 1947. The police interviewed hundreds of suspects in the weeks and months following the murder. One of the most promising early leads came from Robert Red Manley, a salesman and married man who had given Short a ride from San Diego to Los Angeles on January 8 to 9. Manley was the last person known to have seen Short alive, dropping her off at the Biltmore Hotel. He passed a polygraph test and was eventually cleared of any involvement. The investigation was hampered by numerous false confessions. The sensational nature of the case and the extensive media coverage prompted more than 50 people to confess to the murder. Each had to be investigated and ruled out, draining valuable police resources. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case was the killer's apparent medical knowledge. The body had been bisected with surgical precision between the second and third lumbar vertebrae. The cuts were clean and showed expertise in human anatomy. This led investigators to consider doctors, medical students, and others with surgical experience as potential suspects. The killer also demonstrated a disturbing level of premeditation and control. The body had been thoroughly cleaned, and there was no blood at the scene despite the extensive mutilation. This suggested the murder took place elsewhere, with the body being transported to the vacant lot on Norton Avenue. The killer would have needed a private location and likely a vehicle to accomplish this. Another bizarre element was added to the case on January 24, 1947, when someone claiming to be the killer mailed a package to the Los Angeles Examiner. The package contained Short's personal belongings, including her birth certificate, social security card, photographs, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. The items had been cleaned with gasoline to remove fingerprints. Along with the package came a letter composed of cutout letters from magazines, taunting the police to catch the killer. Mark Hansen, whose address book was among the mailed items, was a nightclub owner who had briefly housed Short at his residence. He was questioned extensively but eventually cleared of involvement. The address book led police to interview dozens of men whose names were listed inside, but none proved to be the killer. The investigation also explored Short's movements in the days before her death. She had been seen at several Hollywood establishments, including Bradley's 5 and 10 on Santa Monica Boulevard and the Crown Grill at 754 South Olive Street. However, no one reported anything unusual about her behavior or mentioned seeing her with someone suspicious. As months passed without an arrest, various theories about the killer's identity began to emerge. One popular theory suggested the murderer was a doctor or someone with medical training based on the surgical precision of the cuts. Another theory pointed to organized crime, noting similarities to mob execution styles. The case attracted numerous amateur sleuths and would-be investigators, each with their own theory about the killer's identity. Over the years, more than 24 people have been proposed as possible suspects, ranging from gangsters to surgeons to famous Hollywood figures. One of the most publicized suspects was Dr. George Hodel, a prominent Los Angeles physician. His own son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, would later accuse him of being the Black Dahlia killer. Steve Hodell's investigation, detailed in his book Black Dahlia Avenger, presented circumstantial evidence linking his father to the crime, including his medical expertise and connections to surrealist art that allegedly influenced the staging of Short's body. Another noteworthy suspect was Walter Bailey, a surgeon who lived a block south of the vacant lot where Short's body was found. Bailey had the medical knowledge to perform the bisection, and his daughter was allegedly acquainted with Short. However, Bailey was 67 and suffering from arthritis at the time of the murder, making it unlikely he could have physically carried out the crime. Leslie Dillon, a bellhop and aspiring writer, attracted police attention after corresponding with LAPD psychiatrist Dr. Paul DeRiver about the case. Dillon displayed detailed knowledge of the murder and suggested the killer might have been a mortician's assistant named Jeff Connors. Both Dillon and the mysterious Connors were eventually cleared. Robert Manley, despite being cleared early in the investigation, remained under suspicion in some quarters. His subsequent commitment to a psychiatric hospital in 1954 after claiming to hear voices renewed interest in him as a suspect. However, no evidence has ever emerged linking him to the crime. The investigation was complicated by the corruption and political intrigue that characterized 1940s Los Angeles. The LAPD had a reputation for corruption, and some researchers have suggested that police protection of powerful figures might have impeded the investigation. The department's handling of evidence and witnesses has been criticized by later investigators. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case is how it captured the public imagination and became part of Hollywood folklore. The Black Dahlia murder embodied the dark underbelly of Los Angeles, the flip side of the glamorous Hollywood dream. It represented the dangers faced by young women who came to California seeking fame and fortune. The case has inspired numerous books, films, and television shows. It has become a symbol of film noir, representing the darkness lurking beneath the surface of post-war American society. The murder's combination of Hollywood glamour, gothic horror, and unsolved mystery has kept it firmly in the public consciousness for over 7 decades. One of the most significant developments in recent years has been the use of modern forensic techniques to analyze the historical evidence. While much of the physical evidence has been lost or destroyed over the years, photographs and documents from the original investigation have been studied using contemporary methods. Criminal profilers have suggested that the killer was likely a white male between 30 and 40 years old at the time of the murder. He would have been intelligent, methodical, and familiar with medical procedures. The extensive mutilation of Short's body indicates a deep-seated rage toward women, possibly stemming from rejection or childhood trauma. The killer's decision to pose the body in a public place suggests a desire for attention and recognition. The mailing of Short's personal belongings to the newspaper indicates a need to taunt authorities and maintain control over the narrative. These behaviors are consistent with what we now know about organized sexual sadists. The case has also been examined in the context of other unsolved murders from the same period. Some researchers have suggested links between the Black Dahlia murder and the Cleveland torso murders of the 1930s, or the Chicago lipstick murders of 1945-46. However, no concrete evidence has emerged connecting these cases. One of the most troubling aspects of the case is how Elizabeth Short's memory has been overshadowed by the sensational details of her murder. The media's portrayal of her as a provocative party girl failed to capture the real person, a young woman trying to make her way in a difficult world, who maintained close relationships with her family and showed kindness to friends. Letters from Short to her family reveal someone far more complex than the newspaper caricature suggested. She wrote regularly to her mother and sisters, sharing her hopes and struggles. While she may have embellished her successes in these letters, they show someone who maintained strong family connections despite her transient lifestyle. Friends remembered her as generous and kind, often sharing what little she had with others. Despite her financial struggles, she maintained a dignified appearance, carefully styling her hair and wearing fashionable clothing. She was known for her distinctive look, black hair, pale skin, and dark clothing, which would ironically contribute to her posthumous nickname. The investigation into Short's murder officially remains open in Los Angeles. While the original investigators have long since passed away, detectives occasionally review the case files when new information emerges. However, given the passage of time and the loss of physical evidence, the chances of a definitive solution seem remote. The case has become part of Los Angeles mythology, a cautionary tale about the dark side of the Hollywood dream. It represents a particular moment in American history, the post-war period when women were gaining more independence, but still faced significant dangers in a male-dominated society. The Black Dahlia case also marked a turning point in American media coverage of crime. The sensational reporting, with its focus on lurid details and provocative photographs, set a template that would influence crime journalism for decades to come. The case demonstrated the power of the press to shape public perception and create enduring narratives. Recent years have seen renewed interest in the case, driven by books, documentaries, and the children of original participants coming forward with new information. While these developments have added layers to our understanding of the case, they haven't brought us significantly closer to identifying the killer. The passage of time has made it increasingly unlikely that the case will ever be solved. Most of the original suspects and witnesses are now deceased, and much of the physical evidence has been lost. What remains are photographs, documents, and the enduring mystery of who killed Elizabeth Short. Perhaps the most important legacy of the Black Dahlia case is how it changed the way we think about crime and justice in America. It highlighted the limitations of forensic science in the 1940s, the impact of media sensationalism on investigations, and the complex relationship between police, press, and public in high-profile cases. The case also serves as a reminder of how violent crime affects not just the immediate victim, but ripples outward to impact families, communities, and society at large. Elizabeth Short's family had to cope not only with her tragic death, but with decades of speculation, sensationalism, and amateur investigators probing into their lives. For Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's mother, the tragedy was compounded by the cruel way she learned of her daughter's death. Los Angeles Examiner reporters seeking to get an exclusive reaction called her pretending to be running a contest that Elizabeth had won. Only after getting quotes about how proud she was of her daughter did they reveal the truth about her murder.